Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of 60 Seconds of Stoicism, the only podcast on the internet that goes for 60 seconds but lasts a half hour. I am your host, Ryan Lee Mays, the creator and writer of the Octod program. With me is my social media liaison and my wife, Melinda. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight we have a special episode. Yes, we're saying tonight. We're doing this late. It's, 12 o'clock?
Yeah.
12:15 a.m.? But this is good. Good a time as any to have some study of philosophy, so we're happy that you guys joined us. We are talking about specifically women. When we talk about Stoicism, we focus mainly on the men, and that is with understanding because women were not permitted to be in a lot of the realms of psychology, philosophy, even faith sometimes. And so when we do have some women that kind of step up and show themselves, we want to celebrate them. It was very easy culturally and societally to exclude women from the process of doing all these things. And the reason for that is that men had the authority. They were given the power. So they're the ones that should have the rights to the philosophy, right? Well, not exactly. The Stoics were, a large part of them were about emancipating women, about bringing knowledge and understanding and wisdom and virtue to everyone. Musonius Rufus is probably the most famous for writing, for the writings on him and how he wanted to include women in learning. He got his ideas from, he was watching how they trained horses. And he saw that they trained male horses and female horses almost exactly the same. And he said, well, there's no difference there. And then he watched how they trained dogs, and both male and female dogs were trained the exact same way. So in his thinking, it was, why can't we train both men and women in the education of philosophy for that? So he said, in the case of man, however, it would seem to be felt necessary to employ some special and exceptional training and education for males over females, as if it were not essential that the same virtues should be present in both alike, in man and woman, or as if it were possible to arrive at the same virtues, not through the same, but through different instruction. So why do men have to learn one way and women have to learn from the others, which is usually would just be passed down by older women in the area to the younger ones? But he said, why can't we all learn the same? And that was big for him to say at that time. And, thinking about Rufus in Rome, this is a heavily male-dominated area. And for him to bring up that idea, it really sparks the understanding that Stoicism was made for everyone out there. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few examples of Stoicism, of women of faith, just what we can learn from them going forward and how we can apply those to our lives. Before we do that, we have a lot of strong women in our lives. You are a strong woman, strong mother, strong example to your kids.
Why, thank you.
Yes, but we also have strong women in our lives. And I will tell you one that I work with all the time, and I hope it's okay that I say her name. I know she listens to the podcast, but Joellen. Joellen is the owner of the school that I've worked at for 15 years. I'm the director of. And she has always been an example to me of wanting to do more for not only education, not only for the students, but for also the community around us. And being a private school, it's up to us on how we go out and touch the community. So one of the reasons I've been there for so long is that she's always found new ways to interact with the community, whether it be food drives, book drives, clothing drives, working with homeless shelters, working with shelters for abuse, lots of those different things. She's always found a way to extend beyond the borders of our school to help those in our community. And that's something that I've always admired. Very strong business mind, very intelligent, always a student as well. So that's really something that I love about where I work, not only for Joellen, but also for the other teachers that are there. There are a lot of the teachers at the school that I'm at that have been there for years and that just have awed me with the way that they can find new and exciting ways to educate students, to bring that joy of learning into their lives, which is a big thing for me. So I'm very, very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of strong women. Not only that, but around my wife and my family and my mother and everybody who has been an influence to me. But you also work with somebody who is a very strong woman. and also in an education setting. So you want to talk a little bit about her.
So Nina Poole, she is not just my pastor, but she's also the dean of the school that I work at. She too has been a very, very strong woman. She's, first of all, Samoan, so the Samoan people, they're really strong leaders. She is a very strong woman leader, and I'm very much admired by a lot of the things that she has accomplished. She's been a role model, a mentor for me. But she has served in her community. Mm-hmm. She has served the kids that she's worked with, where we work at, kids that have been turned away from other schools and just have come to us. And, she just has been a rock for them, a leader for them, and just for us as employees as well. Her and Nessie, she's strong woman leader as well. She's Tongan. But man, they have really just showed me and the students just kind of how to be leaders, how to stand up for yourself, how to have a voice. Nina has led her church, but also like Thrive Phoenix. You can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Thrive Phoenix was an organization that she established because she found a section of her neighborhood that was constantly run down and just covered with litter and other things. Mm-hmm. And so she assembled a few people together. We were there, I think, for the first or second one, where we helped clean up the streets there. And then she said, this isn't enough. This is something that has to continue on. So she started an organization called Thrive Phoenix. And she got local law enforcement and local politicians involved and really kind of turned that area around a little bit. But, it's because she stood up and took initiative for that. One thing I wanted to say, you mentioned their cultures. The importance of that is because their idea of service is not stepping back in the shadows and we'll just take care of the men. Their idea of service to others is we're going to be on the front line making sure that it happens, and it happens the most effectively. And I love that. I think that's such a great example, not only to young women, but just people in general, to have a voice and move forward. So very good. Our mothers too. My mother has passed, but I mentioned in the last podcast all about her and the things that she went through. She was very strong. Your mother has come through a lot of trials and tribulations and is still swinging and still as active as ever. And so, great examples in our life. Well, we're going to turn to Stoicism for a moment, and we are going to look at someone who maybe not necessarily identified herself as a Stoic her entire life, but she did when it was most important. And that is Annia Cornifica Faustina Minor, or also known as Marcus Aurelius' daughter. She had an evil brother, Commodus. Commodus is what you see in the movie Gladiator is 10 times worse than that. Commodus was not a good guy. In fact, he was so worried about somebody usurping him that he killed his sister's husband, her son. I think he killed her brother-in-law and her sister-in-law's family. Like, just evil to the core. Well, she survived him somehow. She survived him. And then the following successor, emperor, decided to have her killed, I think mainly just to get rid of the Aurelius name. So he's decided to have her killed. Some say that there might have been an affair that had taken place and this was retribution for it. But regardless, she's there. She is about to die. Roman tradition was forced suicide for a lot of people, especially somebody who was the daughter of an emperor. And that was not only a way to kind of humiliate, but also in a way to pay respect to them as a member of society. It's an irony. You're asking the person to take their own life without you killing them, which seems somewhat indignant, but then also allowing them to choose the way they wanted to die, and her choice was to slit her wrists. And before, they asked her if she had any final says, and there was a lot of lament that came out of her. But the thing I think that really stands out is her final words. And we listen to them. They're both beautiful and haunting. It says, "My poor, unhappy soul, trapped in an unworthy body, go forth, be free, show them that you are the daughter of Marcus Aurelius." And man, what a great last dig on that. that even where she's being forced to take her own life, she still says, I am the daughter of a great emperor. I am the daughter of somebody that ruled with fairness and care and love and was a man of the people. And I'm going to show you right now that this is the result of that through his daughter. That took so much for that, to be able for her to not just scream and shout, vinegar at these people for the things that they were doing to her, but actually bring it back to probably her greatest influence in her life, her father, Marcus Aurelius. It's a tale for us as parents about how we show our example to our children. And one of those examples is passing on wisdom to them. So I want you to think for a second how we have 3 daughters. They're my stepdaughters and love them to death. But how do we most effectively show wisdom to them, where it's not just kind of a ringing bell to them and not a discipline and not a here we go again, but for them to understand that this is something that's really going to help them later on in life, just as Aurelius did for his daughter. Do you have any ideas on how we would show wisdom the best to our daughters?
I think for me in the past, it's been through the examples that I've lived through, learning from my mom's mistakes, and then trying to do my best to then show my kids, hey, don't do what I did. And they've gone through a lot of things with me and that. And so they've learned from my mistakes and just, the people around them as well, showing them where they could, as they were going through things themselves individually, each one of my kids, giving them resources of people that I knew, of growing up, books that I've read, people that I've encountered in my life. There was a lot of times where my kids didn't want to talk to me. Not that they didn't want to, it's just, I'm mom. So, sure. But I was always able to find other people that could relate or that was going through something that my kids would talk to. And I kind of paired them up. And so as long as my kids were talking to somebody, but yeah, I was always trying to find outside resources of examples that could be there for them.
You had somebody that you read books from that you would use a lot for resource in your own life.
Yeah, if I could give an example of someone, it's Christine Kane. She's from Australia. She's an activist, she's an evangelist, she's an author, she's a public speaker. Her and her husband are known for a ministry that they've started that's called the A21 Ministries, and it's for it's an organization that's there to help people that have gone through human trafficking. But she has been able to help women find their purpose and potential and things like that. But she wrote many books that I have read, some of them, not all of them, but some of the titles are Don't Look Back, Resilient Hope, How Did I Get Here, Undaunted, Unexpected, Unshakable, Unashamed, and Unstoppable. So I was able to get some help from there that I was then able to help, as well as just giving those resources to my girls as well.
That's good. I think that is maybe one of the best ways to impart wisdom, because when they're children, they're not going to see wisdom come from us. I mean, they might understand some things. It's not till they're older and they've gone through stuff that they look back and say, oh my gosh, they were trying to tell me not to do this, or this is, this isn't a good thing for me. But when they read it from books, when they get it from other resources, when they talk to other people outside of their familial circle, then they're like, okay, maybe there really is something to this. This person has nothing. It's self-serving by telling me this. They're just trying to give me examples of what to do and what not to do. So very good of doing outside resources. All right, you ready for the next group of people? These are probably names that you talk about every single day in your household. Mala, Noah, Hagla, Milka, and Tirzah.
Oh, those are some names.
Yes. I mean, you guys are, I'm sure, all fans of them. No, in seriousness, probably none of you have even heard of them. But they were in the Old Testament in the Bible. They were 5 sisters who had a father who died. They were out in the wilderness. He had passed away. They come to Moses and the Mosaic law that is under Moses and say, hey, this isn't fair that my father's inheritance is about to be taken from us and given to his brothers. We feel like, as his daughters, we should have a say in that. Why should his family name end with him when we're all still alive? And this is something that perplexes Moses to the point where he has to go speak to God about it. And he says, God, these, 5 sisters want their father's property. That's not tradition under Mosaic law. And God says, you know what, Moses, they're right. We've got it wrong. Give them their inheritance. And so Moses comes back and says, yes, you can have your inheritance, but not only that, we're going to change that law going forward. So now that all women, that if a father passes away, they have right to their father's, possessions. It took the voice of these 5 women in a somewhat repressive Mosaic law to where only men were allowed to hold property and to stand up to Moses and say, hey, there's something wrong here. There's something that needs to be changed. This is something that we also want to teach our daughters. This is something that, we want to show as an example to other women in our life, that you don't have to stand back. You don't have to stay quiet. If you see something happen that is going to make life horrible for somebody else or yourself. So how do you teach women around you, your daughters, sisters, family, friends, to have a voice? And you've gone through a lot of things in your life, and it's your personal journey, so I don't want to say anything that, you might be uncomfortable with, or I leave that to you. But you went through a personal journey where there were things that happened to you where your voice may have been silenced, but also people used their voice to help you.
Yeah. Oh. So as a child, I went through about 12 years of sexual abuse. In my family, they were trying to protect, but then also there were moments of, don't talk about it because it was a shameful thing. I think it was more of, we didn't want to bring shame upon the family. But in growing up and with that, it made me feel like it was my fault and like I couldn't talk about it. And through that, there was a slow process of healing. And so I didn't feel like it was something that was important, even though I was still going through moments of triggering. And it did affect me in the future on just relationships and things like that. So it was things that were just kind of shoved under a rug in the darkness. And then when I started reading Christine Cain's book, I found my voice and I found some healing. I had a family member who came down and was like, hey, this stuff is going on. You need to get away from there. My mom brought us over here because of my aunt. And so we moved to Phoenix. And it was then where I started to find people that were able to help me through those moments of hardship. And I was able to find my voice and talk about things. The light was turned on. Things were uncomfortable for a moment, but in that, I was able to stand up and, but then, I was able to use that to help my kids because just, it's hard to talk about it. Like, my kids went through the same thing. And,
but you weren't going to stand back and cover it up.
Nope.
You were going to learn from, and thank goodness for your aunt. Mm-hmm. She was the voice we're talking about, where she stood up whenever people were trying to kind of keep it hush and said, no, there's an issue here. We're not going to let this continue. Yeah. And then you became that voice for your daughters.
I did, and so I just told my girls the same thing, I don't take lightly what happened, and also just telling them, look, we were victims, we're no longer victims, but now we could use this, and now we can use this to help those around us. So again, just pairing them with help through counseling, talking to people within the family, but outside of the family, myself, and so just, helping them to find who they are. That wasn't going to dictate their life, and they also weren't going to use that as an excuse to immobilize them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. No, that's excellent. And that's what we want to do. We want to show that we don't have fear to speak up and to say something. I heard a horrible story years ago about a young woman who was assaulted in the street, and the police had received tons of phone calls from people calling it in, but nobody went out to intervene. Nobody went out to, speak out or to say stop, and some people will say, well, yeah, because they shouldn't put themselves at danger, let the police handle it. I get that. But could you imagine if all 15 of those people that called all walked out at once and showed themselves in numbers? That is what we can do when we're teaching, especially young women who are dealing with things like assault, to band together and to come out and say, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to deal with this stuff that's going on that's being swept under the cover. And we're seeing more and more of that now as generations go along, thankfully. But yeah, have that voice, stand up, speak out, and think change will happen because of it. So very good. All right. We are going to talk about another woman of Stoicism. This is Phanaia. Phanaia was an ancient Roman. She lived probably right around 100 AD. She was the daughter of Thrasea, I'm going to say his name wrong, Thrasea Paetus, or Paetus. And she shows up in the writings of Pliny the Younger. Pliny the Younger was kind of a leader who was also a default rebel historian, I don't know to put it that way, but he did a lot of writing about people that had shown great wisdom and strength that he did. But he writes about Phanaia and talks about her. So she had a husband who was very much opposed to what was going on in Rome at the time. Her father, Thrasea, was the Stoic opposition to Nero. Basically, very outspoken on how he felt about Nero and the things that Nero was doing. Her husband was kind of falling in line with that. And her husband was exiled multiple times. She would go along with him in the exile and suffer those things together. She was very, very strong, very supportive through that. Her husband was exiled by Nero because he showed some sympathy for Brutus, and we know what Brutus did to Caesar when he killed him. So showing sympathy for that. So anyways, Nero found every reason he could to exile from him. Well, once gone and out of the picture, she asked somebody named Herennius, who was basically a biographer, to write this biography about her husband and the things that he stood up for and what he meant to the opposition to Nero and the Roman government. And so Herennius does, and not only does he not get exiled, he gets killed for doing so. But she is present at his trial, and when the chance comes for her to kind of slink away into the shadows, to back away, she doesn't. She basically puts it all on herself. She stands up and doesn't shy away from her feelings and really puts a death sentence on herself. Well, Pliny the Younger, again, this writer, he writes about her, and I want to read his words because this is exactly what Stoicism is. He said, she did not utter a single word to reduce the danger to herself. And then he goes on and describes her right before her death. He says, only her spirit is vigorous, worthy of her husband and her father Thrasea. But everything else is going down, and I'm not merely afraid, but deeply saddened. It pains me that so great a woman will be snatched from the eyes of her people. And who knows when her like will be seen again. What chastity, what sanctity, what dignity, what constancy. How pleasant she is, how kind, how respectable, and amiable. At once two qualities rarely found in the same person. Indeed, she will be a woman who later we can show our wives, from whose fortitude men can also draw an example from. Whom now, while we can still see her, we can admire her as much as those women we have read about before. So Pliny goes on to just write this glowing tribute to Phanaia and say she was a woman under fire and she held her grace. I mean, the way that he talks about her and just the sanctity and dignity that she showed, she could have also, gone out and just screamed at the people accusing her and yelled them or hid or backed away. But no, she stood right up there and she took it. And she serves an example. And the thing that I like about this is he talks about men, show your wives how great this is, because this is who we want our wives to be like. But also says, men, this is an example you should be taking from. This isn't just for the women. This is for something for you to take into your life and to use for that. So great example of Stoicism. people hurling insults, people trying to put you to death, and you have that ataraxia that is so strong that you're like, I am just not going to let this penetrate who I am as a person. I'm still going to stand up for what I believe in. So, very good. Okay, thank you, Frenaya, for that example. We're going to go to one more really quick. So we're actually going to go back to the Old Testament, to Scripture. Christians, we have great examples in the New Testament of Jesus and the apostles and Paul and Peter and their founding of the church. But when we go back to the Old Testament, back to Israel, we realize that in that culture, Israel fell in and out of favor with God pretty frequently. And so before they had any kings, God said, I'm going to send you judges. And these are basically going to be the people that rule over you and help you get along. And at this particular time, Israel was in a bad place. They had a judge. Her name was Deborah. Deborah was a amazing woman, very skilled in her reasoning. She would sit there and judge the things that were going on, that were right or wrong. But at this particular point, God had allowed Israel to fall into the hands of King Jabin from Canaan, and basically he controlled them. Well, now Deborah understands. God lets her know this is the time to go and free your people. So King Jabin had this commander named Sisera. He had tons and tons of chariots, and these were armored chariots. It's not like the wood chariots you see behind a horse. These things were covered in iron and were like mini tanks. He had this whole army of mini tanks, so beating them seemed impossible. Well, Deborah goes to her commander, Barak, and says, hey, I want you to take 10,000 people, and you're going to go down and attack Sisera. And this seems like a death march. Sisera is stronger. He's got more weapons. And Barak tells Deborah, okay, look, I'm going to go, but I won't go unless you go. And Deborah has responsibilities. She's got a husband, she's got a family, and she's a judge. The children of Israel are relying on her. But she tells him, okay, I'll go. But if I go, just know that when we win, the credit's not going to go on you. It's going to go on me. And they're going to say it's because of a woman that we won. But Barak's fine with it. He's like, I can't win this without you. So he lets Deborah lead as she goes out there, and they crush them. Israel gets freed. Sisera takes off running with his tail behind him. And Deborah is the victor that day. The children of Israel are the victor that day. We see this great leader who she could have stayed behind and just said, no, that's not my job. I have a political position here. I'm the judge. You go out and do this because that's what God commanded. But no, Deborah said, I'll be right out there with you. And she lifted everybody up with her presence. They looked at her as a source of strength, and they won. But there's kind of a bonus story that goes along with this, because there was another woman involved in all this. So remember, Sisera's free. Okay, he runs. He goes to what he believes is an ally's tent. And this ally, Heber, who's basically his family are the allies, not necessarily Heber himself. But he goes to his tent and he says, let me in. And in Jael, Heber's wife was the only one there. So Jael lets him in. And Sisera tells Jael, look, they're going to come looking for me. Stand at the entrance of the tent. And when they come by and say, have you seen Sisera? Just say, nope, no idea where he's at. And all will be good. So he talks to Jael and he says, I'm thirsty, by the way. I mean, he just got done running for his life. He's like, I'm thirsty. So she doesn't give him water. So she gives him a wineskin of milk, which we know what warm milk does when you drink it at night. Puts you to sleep. So Sisera decides to take a nap. While he's sleeping, Jael goes over, gets a hammer and a tent peg, puts it to a skull, and hammers his head into the ground, killing him instantly. She has defeated the great Sisera. And so when Barak comes looking for Sisera, she's like, hey, he's right here. He's pegged to the ground. Look what I did. Okay, so the moral of the story is do not drive tent pegs into people's heads. We're not just saying that. It's saying that women can play two different parts. They can be the leader, and the same for men as well, but, two different parts. But they can be the leader. They can go out on the front line. But there's also people that are behind that are important almost as equally to what is being done. Deborah was out there helping to win the war. Her presence was there. Her advice was there. She was advising Barak as she went. But Jael, she was a housewife that when the time came and she saw her opportunity to do something good, she seized it. And what a wonderful lesson that is from both of them. We show justice, courage, bravery, all the things that we're looking for as students of Stoicism, all the things that we want in our lives when we're looking at ourselves of how should we act, how should we be in society around us. So I guess when we get down to our question here, what is it that we want our 3 daughters personally to know? And maybe this is something that, you guys can use as well in your life and with other women you have, maybe for yourself, maybe for a mother or sister or friend, coworker. Let's go through each one of the daughters. What is something that we really hope for them to have, that we really wish for them to have, and that we can show them as examples of Stoicism? We'll start with our older daughter. She has a lot of fear and anxiety. What do you think would be the best Stoic lesson that we could teach her?
Well, she's super smart.
Yeah, very smart.
She's very artistic, like crazy. I don't think she even knows how amazing she is.
Yeah.
But even through a lot of her anxiety that she has, which I could relate, she's kind of like me in some ways. She's let fear stop her.
Yeah.
And there's been moments where we had a heart-to-heart talk, and I just said, even through the fear, don't let it stop you. It's do it afraid.
Yeah.
Do it afraid. And there was a lot of moments that I would say she has seen me grow, even myself. And she has said, Mom, I can see that you're growing. And I was just like, I'm tired. I'm tired of letting past fear stop me from so many opportunities. And so it was the same thing for her. So I've seen her grow, and I've seen her get the counseling and the help. I'm super proud that she is stuck with that she continues to do that. But for her, it'd be ataraxia.
Oh, very good. Yeah, ataraxia, that sense of that self-fortress, that imperturbability, the things that are around me are not going to get to me. They're not going to destroy me. I'm going to build up such a self-confidence and understanding of myself that those things will just deflect. And I think ataraxia is a really good one for her. She's very brave, very smart, like you said, very talented, but self-doubts because of things that have happened in her past has caused her to have a lot of anxiety. So I think ataraxia would be a great lesson for her to learn. Our middle child. Our middle child is very bright. She could have an eidetic memory because she repeats just everything that she sees and reads. But that can also be a bad thing because very outspoken, really wants to step up for justice and what goes on. But also, I think because of reading a lot of things that are in the news and on media, causes a lot of anxiety with her.
Yeah, I think she's really been affected by mostly politics, I would say.
Yeah.
And, I love my kids. I love the things that they stand for. I may not agree with a lot of the things, but I love the fact that they do, and they have beliefs and things that they strongly believe in. And, she's one of them. But I can also see where it affects her.
Yeah.
So I would say,
dichotomy of control.
Dichotomy of control is the one she deals with.
Yeah, I agree. You have to know what you can control and what you can't. And that's a lesson from Epictetus. I can't control that my government is going to do a certain thing, but I can control how I feel about it, how I stand up to it, how I express it to others. And that's really where the importance is for that. I have really pulled myself off news lately. I've tried to listen to just a little thing. I feel like we're in the new Rome right now, and Nero is in office. And, what a wonderful time for us to really bury ourselves into philosophy because we're kind of reliving that moment. But we are also having our children, I don't want to say victims, but they're being affected by the things that are going around us right now. And so again, it's just focusing on what you can control and what you can't. So we teach that lesson to her for sure. And then we have our youngest. Our youngest is great. So our youngest is a Leo, just like I am. And I think we're natural born leaders, but oftentimes we can be a little bit too much self-wise. And so what would we wish for our youngest? Austerity?
Austerity.
Yeah.
She's come a long ways.
She has, absolutely.
When she was younger, man, it was like just getting her to clean her room or do her homework and things like that. But, I think you coming along and partnering with me and just giving her that motivation of like, okay, Ange, if you do this, if you do that, we will give you this, we will give you that. And so, and then there was some selfishness that came out of it, but then I think as she's gotten older, we've seen such growth where now she has not just cared about herself, but the people that are around her and, some friends of hers. But yeah, she's controlled by things.
Yeah. And I will say it's the selfishness of youth. It's the selfishness we've all had, when we were children and we had to grow up. Now she's starting to learn to put others before herself, just as we had to learn to do. But it is definitely one of those tenets of Stoicism, working for the greater good of humanity and not just for the advancement of self. Also being happy with few things. That's why I said austerity is a little bit more strictness on yourself, being happy with fewer things, being happy with what you already have instead of trying to get that golden apple constantly, that causes you to forget where your priorities lie. So, yeah.
Definitely.
So she's doing great. Very, very proud of her. These are the things that we're talking about when we work together as a society to raise young women the way they should be, not to teach them to be subservient, not to teach them to be, and I know I'm going to step on toes with this, but I don't care. I'm the stepfather of 3 daughters. I'm going to say that. Not to be subservient, to be leaders, to have a voice, be vocal to situations that you can change, that you can affect. Don't let the words of other people that try to hold you down and stop you from being great be effective. You can tell yourself, no, I'm not going to listen to that, and I'm going to continue to be better on the things that I want to improve on in my life. So that's a wonderful thing. Have a voice. Teach the women in your life. Have a voice. We support you. Be strong. Be courageous. Be a student. And that will help you later on in life, and we'll have more and more of these just amazing women that will stand up and do wonderful things. So, all right, thank you everybody so much for listening. We appreciate it. Again, it's late night for us. We are approaching the 1 o'clock hour here soon, so hopefully you guys are listening to this at a decent time. Still, we will wake up early in the morning because that is a Stoic thing to do. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for being students of Stoicism. That is what we are too. We are not as an authority or someone to lecture down at you, but actually fellow students in Stoicism. Always remember that it's an intelligent mind that produces intelligent health. And until next time, my friends, Semper Studiosus. We'll see you next time.